On to series 3. We have been focusing this entire year on this word grow, and what does that mean for us, and what does it mean to grow, and what does it mean to have deep roots, and this next series is all about the gardener. And so I want us to kind of get into a gardening mindset. Who loves gardening? Yep. Okay, 7 people, fantastic. This is gonna go over really well. This whole idea of God being a gardener, God being a designer, God being diligent and intentional is really important for us to get our heads around seeing God this way, because there is nothing, and I mean nothing, that God does that is not intentional and on purpose. And we are gonna walk through this idea over the next 4 weeks, and a lot of it will come out of this particular passage in John chapter 15, verses 1 to 5. And we're gonna unpack it over the next few weeks. But what it says is, I am the true grapevine, and my Father, so this is Jesus talking, my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit. He prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you, for a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine. And you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. So we're gonna spend some time in this, but focus particularly on the role of a gardener. And this is an old idea. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but in the beginning, God created a garden. What we read in Genesis is, and I'm sure even if you've not been around church at all in your whole life, you've heard of the Garden of Eden. Yes? It's not the forest of Eden. It's not the jungle of Eden. It's not like there was this big patch of land and he called it Eden. It is not by accident that God created a garden for people to live in. So this is an old idea. And a garden presupposes intentionality and purpose. A jungle doesn't. But a garden means that this whole idea is built on purpose. It is made for a reason, and it needs to be tended. It needs to be cared for. So this is an old idea. And I think it's so important for us to get our heads around this, because I need you to see God as an intentional designer. And what I would love this morning is for you to have a new sense of awe around the incredible design of God. Because I think it's easier for us to have faith in God's plans for our own life if we have some kind of grasp on how intricately He has designed everything. And so I want to talk about the design, the intricately designed purposes of God. And so I'm going to throw some facts and figures out to you today. Maybe you've heard them before, maybe you haven't, about the world, about the human body, about all these sorts of things, because what we all need to understand is that none of this works if we throw the numbers off a little bit. The world, the planet, the universe, even our bodies. If we throw the numbers off just a little bit, none of it works. And so I want you to begin to understand that the world was designed intricately. The creation story. Now, how many of you wish there was more information? That would have been great. And people ask me, like, why isn't the creation story like more information, please? Like, that would help me so much when I'm in that evolutionary conversation with my friend at work. Can I tell you this? There are certain things that God doesn't think are important for us to understand. How many of you are happy with that answer? I don't like that answer. There are certain things that are too really big for us to wrap our heads around. And even if we could grasp all of that information, we wouldn't be able to. The fact of the matter is that God created everything, period. I know that's not helpful, but in this creation story, we see chaos and nothing. And God creates, and God speaks. And there is intricate design to everything. And what you see is a purposeful step every single day of the creation story. A purposeful step towards design, towards God doing something that has meaning and purpose. Like a watch is designed meticulously with structure and order and delicacy, so too is the world and the universe. And if you change any of it, it goes wrong. And so let me give you some facts and figures. The shape and dimensions of our planet. Earth has an equatorial diameter of about 12,756 kilometers, a polar diameter of about 12,356 kilometers, because mass distribution and gravity vary. The most mathematically precise model of its shape is called a geoid. All right, so you're like, okay, great, awesome. Why is this important? Now, some of you might be writing this down because you're interested in stuff like this, but what you don't see is a perfect sphere. Did you notice that? It's not same. It's precise. There's a variation to the shape of our planet, and there's a reason for it. Let me talk to you about the interior structure. The Earth is stratified into distinct chemical and physical layers. The crust, a rigid, rocky outer layer, about 5 to 70 kilometers thick. A mantle, about 2,900 kilometers thick, hot, semi-fluid layer of silicate rock, which tectonic plates ride. Outer core, a fluid layer of molten iron, nickel that generates the Earth's magnetic field. And an inner core, a solid sphere of iron and nickel at the planet's heart, roughly the size of the moon. Yeah. Now some of you are going like, am I in school? Why? Like, just read the Bible or something. There's a reason. For those of you who are not enamored by this stuff, just get your head around it. We are not just on a marble, yeah? We're not just on a big rock. There's design. There are layers of design that make everything work in just a very particular way, because in our whole solar system, there is one planet that can survive life. And in order for that to occur, all of these layers have to act a certain way to make that happen. Design, intricacy, surface composition. The Earth is an ocean world. Approximately 70.8% of its surface is covered by liquid water, the oceans, with the remaining 29.2% consisting of continental land masses. What do we know that we need to survive? Water. You know how much water we need to survive? 70.8% of the planet needs to be covered in it. Not 80, not, 75 is good, or 70, or it's precise. I want you to understand that everything in the design of God is precise for a purpose. God created a world for people and life to exist on. And in order for him to do that, these things needed to be exact. The atmosphere is a protective gaseous envelope comprised primarily of nitrogen, 78%, and oxygen, 21%, which creates the pressure and climate systems required to maintain a liquid surface water. Do you see the intricacy of the numbers? Imagine you had to come up with this kind of a model. How much nitrogen do you think they need? I'm sure 80% is good. I'm sure 90%. No, we'd be dead. It actually has to be 78%. I want you to get a sense of something. God delicately, intricately, beautifully designed this planet so that people could live on it and everything else could find life. So that there would be a planet and a space here for us to tend and take care of. And we are the recipients of that. I know that we just get up in the morning and we keep breathing and we use, we mow the lawns and all that sort of stuff. And we don't think about the intricacy of everything. But I want you to just stop for a second this morning with a sense of gratitude. That God, in his infinite wisdom, was able to create a planet for us to exist on with such precise information. Isn't God a great designer? Yeah? Well, let's take that into a more personal space. Not only was the world intricately designed, you were intricately designed. Psalm 139, maybe you have read it before. If you haven't read the entire chapter, I encourage you to do that. But I'm just going to read from verses 13 to 17. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was even born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had even passed. How precious are your thoughts of me, O God. They cannot be numbered. Now, this wasn't just true of the psalmist, obviously, but he had a revelation of something. That the plans and purposes of his life were laid out by God before he breathed. Design, purpose, all that sort of stuff. And I encourage you to read this. If you can do this and actually look at the mirror when you're doing this, because a lot of people can believe this about everybody else but themselves. But I would encourage you to do that. God has made you purposefully and intricately for right now. And his thoughts about you are precious. Not just me, you. And there's something about getting our head around that God put so much thought into making you the way you are. And it's kind of our job to figure out, well, why? Why am I wired this way and for what purpose? But this verse speaks to this intimate knowing, this beauty around how God shaped us right from the beginning to be a certain way, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that every day of our lives were scripted out. Let me tell you about the complexity of the human body a little bit. Water, and I'll just talk about water because we talked about, we have a world that's full of water. We have bodies that are also full of water. I don't know if you knew that. Some of you are like, I have too much. Some of you maybe have too little. But water distribution through the body varies drastically between organs. And again, I want you to see intricacy here. The lungs are comprised of about 83% water. Muscles and kidneys, about 79. Brain and heart, 73. Skin, 64. Bones, 31. Why is this important? I want you to understand, like, these are just not like thrown out numbers that you can, let's just put however much water we want to put in the human body. No, it's specific. And it gets even more specific between men, women, and children. You need a certain amount of water in your body just to exist and to breathe and to walk around. And God made sure you had the exact right calculation in order to do that. That is not by accident. It is by design. And one of the things that I love, I don't know how much of you kind of spend any time thinking about this or doing any reading about this, but what they thought would happen when they got into the molecular level of things is that things would get more and more simple. And that would help explain evolutionary theory. Because they believe we came from something simple into something complex. But what they discovered is the further you go down, even on a molecular level, the more complex things get. You don't find simplification, you find complexity. We are beautifully and wonderfully made. God is an intelligent, intricate designer of things. And nothing that he does happens by accident. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 10 says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do good things he planned for us long ago." And so I want you to, I know we're talking about God being the gardener, God being a designer, God doing things intentionally. If we don't start here, then when I start talking about pruning, you're going to get confused. When I start talking about God's other actions and the things that he does as a gardener, if you don't first understand him as an intricate, intelligent, purposeful designer, it's very hard for you to understand the other things. Now, I understand that this is a faith thing. I understand that we're all sitting here and we're all going through different things in our lives. And there are some things that are happening in our lives that we're wondering, God, why did you write these pages? Right? Surely some of you are thinking that. Like, if God's so intelligent, why am I going through this? Why did he write this into the story? How did he not change everything so that my life is a fairy tale? That would really affirm him being a good designer. The beautiful thing, and now I don't know why God gave us free will. Some of you might argue that wasn't that intelligent. But what he didn't want to create was robots. He wanted to create people that he could walk with, converse with, talk with, people that he could have genuine relationship with, which means he needed to introduce free will. In order for there to be genuine relationship, there needs to be choice, something we can choose into. And so God wanted to create relationship with people. And so he allows us to be involved in the process. And even though the entirety of our lives are known to God because he's outside of time, and while he knows what's on all the pages of your life, we also have to admit that we're not the only one writing this. He's not the only one writing the story. Because sometimes we like to take the pen. And just because he knows what those pages look like does not mean he wrote them. Does that make sense? He has an intention for us. He has a purpose for us. He wants us to discover it. He wants you to live a life fulfilled. He wants all of those things for your life. But sometimes we like to take the pen, and sometimes there are parts of our story that we wrote, and sometimes there are parts of the story that other people had influence on. We're part of a broken world. Not everything goes the way that we want. Sometimes we experience sickness, all that sort of stuff. That doesn't go against God's intelligent design. It just means that we are part of something that stepped out of his original design. Because the garden was perfect. And that was his design and plan for humanity. That humanity stepped out of. And so he created a perfect plan of redemption. And one day, things will be restored to perfection again. But in the meantime, we live in this broken space. And even though, yes, we do experience things that are hard and difficult, and sometimes we make mistakes and all of that sort of stuff, it doesn't go against God's intelligent design of everything. And what I want for you to understand this morning is that God has a very particular and specific thing for you to be doing. There is a purpose to everything, and it is by his design. There's a purpose to you, and that is by design. And I can tell you that God's great purpose for everyone is not to become a preacher or a pastor, or to get in, be on staff at a church, all that sort of stuff. That's not God's great design for everybody. God's great design for everybody is for us to live in relationship with him as he always intended, as sons and daughters, to live in fellowship with him and to obey and listen to the gardener. That's his great design for each and every one of us, and any one of us can step into that. That's open to every single one of us. As we set out talking about the things that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, it starts with a trust. Do you trust him? You know, I can rhyme off all those facts and figures about the world. I can rhyme off many, many more about the human body. Charles Darwin himself said, if you explore the intricacy of the human eyeball, he said, nothing speaks to the idea of an intelligent designer more than the human eye. Because these things just couldn't happen by accident. They couldn't just evolve that way. We are intricate, but do you trust that God is an intelligent designer? Do you believe that God has intelligently designed you? Do you believe that God has made you on purpose, for purpose? It starts with trust. It starts with a faith statement. Do you trust the gardener's design? I'm going to ask the musos to come back up. Or do we continue to do our own thing? Again, God gave us some of his attributes. Yeah? How many creatives do we have in the room? Don't lie. Just put your hand up if you're creative. Yeah? Isn't it amazing that God put his creative genius in us that we could create? Yeah? That we could make stuff up, that we can build things, that we can envision things, that we can produce things, all those beautiful and wonderful things. But I can tell you this, sometimes we're really, really bad authors. We can also be the creators, writers, authors of our own destruction. And instead of allowing and trusting in God's great designs, we say, no, God, I think I got this. I have a good idea. And this goes back to just, do I trust him or do I not trust him? And really, that's what I want to leave us with this morning. And if this has stirred up a little bit of curiosity, I encourage you to follow that curiosity. Do some research this afternoon and find out how intricate the human body really, really is. How well designed it is. But do you believe in faith this morning in a God that is an incredible, beautiful, wonderful designer? And can you believe that for your own life? Not just the world around you, not just those close to you, but for yourself personally. God made you. His thoughts about you are precious. He designed you to be fruitful. He designed you to make an impact and a difference in this world. To be part of something much bigger than yourself. You don't call one plant a garden. Again, the idea of a garden presupposes relationship and many things involved in something together. We only find our purpose when we live in the garden, alongside of other plants, doing their thing, producing their fruit. And we all do that together under the watchful, caring eye of the gardener. Can we all stand together? I just would love for you to close your eyes for a minute. We're just going to have this moment where, and I don't know where you're at. I don't know how much wonder, I don't know how much awe you have. I don't know how much gratitude you have around God and his intelligent and beautiful design. But I would love for you to take a moment just right now and be grateful that God has designed you, knit you together, woven you together for such a time as this. And I know that there are things going on in our lives that we don't quite understand. I know that there are things going on that may be very difficult, may be very challenging, but God is a good gardener. He's watchful, he's caring, and he wants us to constantly be going to him, trusting in him, believing in him, because what God can do, what the gardener can do, is take anything and turn it into good. Turn it into fruitfulness for his glory and for his honor. And so God, in this moment right now, I pray that a sense of wonder would stir in our hearts. And more than that, Lord God, that we would find ourselves in this place that if you put so much energy, effort, thought, and care into designing the universe and the world and into humanity, then God, I want to trust you with my life. I want to trust you with my life. You knit me together. You formed me. You know why you created me. And I want to take that faith step to trust you with my life. God, that we would have a sense of awe and appreciation and gratitude for how extraordinary you are as a designer and gardener. God, that the right and appropriate thing is for us to offer up our lives to you in full surrender, to say, God, I trust you as the gardener to take me on this journey, to do what you need to do in my life, to shape me, mold me, form me, because you've already done so much of it. And I want to trust you with the rest. God, we offer ourselves to you in this space right now. I pray that we would be willing to take that faith step. And as we go on this journey around the gardener, that each week we would take a step in to trusting you and see you as you truly are, the diligent, caring gardener. So just while we're in this space, we're going to sing this song. It's all for you. Let's understand ourselves under the care of the gardener in this beautiful, wonderful garden that he's called us to. And let's offer ourselves completely in surrender to a gardener that we can trust. Amen.